Welcome back to the Megatherium Club podcast, everybody. I hope you all are doing great this spooky month. Hopefully, hopefully
Woo!
we get this out to you. With that still being relevant, with Halloween coming up or shortly after it. We
Hey,
thought,
Sean, is that a play on how fast I edit? Because, ouch. Ouch.
no, that was. Sometimes we as a whole are not fast at putting these episodes out. So we always have a goal to get them out fast, and life happens. We're not making money on this, so it's not the highest of our priorities. But we love doing it, so we're gonna keep doing it when we have time.
That's
And
exactly right.
but with Halloween coming up, or recently passed, we thought we would do an episode on a theme relating to that. And today's episode is going to be about the undead. What does that mean? Well, all of our organisms have something in common today by either being half dead zombie thing or coming back from the dead in one way or another. And I'll let Spencer kind of take it from there with the first one today.
Now, Sean, did you watch HBO's very famous show, The Last of Us, or play the video game based on that title?
I did watch it. I did not play the video game, unfortunately.
Okay. I never played the video game either. So, yeah. But I did watch the show, thought it was pretty amazing.
Oh, so
So
cool.
the show is, if you haven't seen it, obviously this isn't going to spoil anything, but the show revolves around post-apocalyptic world where there are zombies, but these zombies aren't just your normal Shaun of the Dead, Night of the Living Dead zombies. These are people who are infected not with a virus, not with some curse, but with a fungus,
Ooh.
specifically a cordyceps fungus. Now, according to a wonderful article through NPR and fairly good common sense, this is not possible in our reality.
As of right now.
As well, Sean, you spoil that nonsense.
Oh, shoot.
We'll get there. We'll get there.
Okay.
So yes, but if you're an insect, this and you're living in certain areas, this is like a very real possibility of how you will go out is by becoming essentially a fungus zombie. Now, you're not going to probably go crazy and start eating the brains of your fellow, say, ants, but your one drive will be to infect other ants, which I guess is similar to the this or the Last of Us TV show. So, what the heck am I talking about? Cordyceps. It's a fungus. A fungus is not a plant. It's not an animal. It's its own thing. There's some evidence that they're actually more closely related to animals than they are plants, even though a lot of people kind of group them in with plants. But they're very distinctive. And so if you've ever had like a fungus infection, like that fungi can infect humans, but not in this way. So let's kind of take a look at what's going on. Fungus reproduce through spores, right? You might used to be looking at like a big pine tree and it's releasing pollen into the air. Well, that's just one half of the plant's reproductive beginnings. Whereas a spore is just, this is ready to go. Once a spore lands on something, it can germinate and then it can start doing its thing. And that's true for all fungus. And the spores are released by the mushroom. Okay, so the mushroom we think of, hey, that's the fungi. And yes, technically it is. But actually, that's just the reproductive part of a fungi, where most of the fungi is, if we're talking about something living in the soil or underneath a, rotting tree bark or something, most of the fungus is just like a big fungal mat, mycelium, okay? The mushrooms are essentially kind of like, not the last part of its life, but just the reproductive part of its life. It's kind of yeah,
It's like
not
the
the
fruit.
major part.
Yeah,
Like
the fruiting
yeah,
body.
they call it the fruiting body. So let's take you as a journey. Imagine yourself as a little ant walking around, say, the rainforest floor. You're just walking around, looking for something to eat, looking for something to bring back to the colony, and you happen to walk along, and your leg brushes up against a spore of a mycelium fungus that had just rained down onto the forest floor. Well, as soon as this fungus attaches, sticks to the leg of you, the ant, it starts releasing enzymes. And those enzymes can break through the hard exoskeleton of the insect, the cuticle. And once it's done that, it germinates. And it sends out these little thread-like structures called hypha, which break into the body and start spreading around in the body. So at this point, you're infected. If you're an ant, what's that?
Are these like analogous to, say, the roots of a plant?
Yeah.
Kind of.
Again, maybe in looks, right?
Okay.
But I think other than that, because the hypha are essentially, they're the ones that are spreading through and literally eating through the inside of the body. Whereas roots aren't necessarily eating, they're just spreading and then
absorbing
obviously
nutrients.
They're absorbing nutrients.
Yeah.
They're not taking stuff in and feeding it to the mycelium, to that fungal mat that is now developed with inside you, the ant.
The host.
So
Gotcha.
yeah, but I think in terms of how it might look in your brain, then yes, like a root system of sorts. So what's going to happen is, depending on the type of fungus that you're working with, because there are a lot more than just cordyceps. Cordyceps is like a family, and there are lots of different styles in there, and then there are fungi outside of that family that do similar things. And different fungi can do different things. Maybe I'll just talk about the big one, this one cordyceps that everybody knows about, and then kind of mention some of the other ones. Cordyceps is going to eat through the inside of this ant and start to kind of basically hollow it out, all while the ant is still technically alive. And this works with ants because ants they don't have a nervous system that's necessarily set up like ours. And I think we've talked about this in the podcast before. And then that their nervous system, it's segmented, and it's segmented throughout the segments of their bodies, because all insects are segmented. Just might not be as apparent. So as long as the nervous system is left intact and the muscle systems are left intact, then an ant can survive pretty long without its organs. So this fungi, that's what it's going for first. It's eating its organs. So the ant is not able to eat anymore, but the fungus can take up that space. And eventually what it's going to do is this fungus is going to start releasing neurotoxins or something like that. And in some funguses, I don't want to get ahead of myself. So in this case, what it's going to do is, the mechanisms aren't entirely known and aren't entirely understood. But when the mycelium has established itself enough within the ant, and it's ready to produce those fruiting bodies, those mushrooms, it wants to take the ant to a higher location than it might already be. So say if you're on the ground, well, it wants to go up into the tree and maybe out on a little branch in order to be able to spread its spores across a wider area. The mechanism behind how it makes an ant actually do what it wants to do is not well understood. But the idea is that it either takes over the nervous system itself and tells the ant to essentially climb, or it might take over some of the aspects of the muscular system and do the climbing itself. It could be a combination of both as well, but it makes the ant, this fungus, climb up a tree, go out onto a little branch, and then do something called the death grip. And so once it's at the suitable height, the fungus forces the ant to clamp its mandibles, its jaws, onto a leaf or a twig and hold. And ants are pretty notorious at being able to hold on to things really well, even well past death. It's kind of, it's kind of like their thing almost.
Don't some tribes in the Amazon use the heads of ants as stitches?
Yeah, they do.
That's pretty cool. Gnarly.
That is, it is pretty gnarly, that's for sure. I think they use probably carpenter ants. So this cordyceps. So the specific cordyceps that I'm talking about is Ophiocordyceps unilateralis. That's the zombie ant fungus. Pretty cool name, or common name if you ask me. And I think carpenter ants are the ones that they use for stitches. But don't quote me on that because I didn't look it up. So anyway, once the ant has established a strong grip, then the mycelium, the fungus, it forms those fungal bodies and it breaks through the top of the exoskeleton or any softer point in the exoskeleton, and it'll form little mushrooms. And underneath the mushroom head, where you might see lots of little lines and stuff.
The gills.
The gills, yes. Now, not every mushroom has gills, but that's kind of
okay.
They might have other shapes and other styles and stuff, but that's where it is. That's where the spores are. So the mushroom will start releasing spores, and essentially it's going to rain down upon the rest of the tree, the forest floor. Maybe if it's really lucky, right on top of the colony itself, and to essentially do the same thing. And that's how the cycle continues. Now, again, we don't know how it does this. We don't completely understand the mechanisms behind this. We have a good idea of some of the chemicals that they release, but it's still not entirely like, yes, we know how it makes something do something else. Because that's really kind of, frankly, hard to study in the lab, right? So I think scientists, as we continue to study this, will eventually get a better understanding. But they have some ideas. So, but that's the specific cordyceps that everybody probably has a good idea in their mind. But other ones can essentially do similar things. There's the housefly fungus, which essentially, like the fungus, like a spore will land on a fly. Same thing, gets inside, spreads throughout the body cavity, and the flies can still fly around for a few days, and then the fungus again will make it climb up to a high place or fly up there, and then it adopts this pose called the pose doesn't have a specific name, but essentially it makes the fly put out its wings to increase, I don't know, like I guess the surface area or something like that. So then the fungus has like more of a surface area to like grab onto. I don't know. The article I read was specific about the wings outstretched on this fly. So yeah, I mean, those are just a few of them. There are lots of other fungi that can do different things.
I think I've seen like a rare example of a cordyceps affecting a tarantula.
Yeah, so that's probably one of the famous pictures you've seen where this tarantula is completely covered in mushrooms, essentially. Mm-hmm. And yes, cordyceps, like the zombie ant cordyceps, the Ohio, or I keep calling it Ohio. I don't know why.
It's the same thing.
Ophio. There's an extra P in there. Ophiocordyceps.
Don't go to Ohio. You'll catch it as a human.
Yep. It can affect other arthropods, and it's kind of known famously for infecting both ants and spiders. But the name is zombie ant fungus. I'm sure that it comes from the fact that maybe we first discovered it in ants or something like that, because that's generally how things are. Is the first discovery gets all the credit, and then it's like everything else is extra on top of that. Yeah. But yes, there is a famous example of that affecting a tarantula, which would be pretty cool to see. A tarantula climbing up a tree and just like hanging out on a branch. Of course, you're not going to be able to watch it in real time, but to watch the shrooms grow from it. And of course, there are cool time-lapse videos that you can watch on the internet.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. So
that would be pretty metal, as they say these days.
That's exactly right. Now, Sean, earlier you mentioned that this is not possible. Well, I mentioned that it's not possible, and you're like, well, maybe it is possible.
Oh, yeah?
Yes. So the idea is the reason that we cannot get infected by cordyceps at this time is that our body temperatures, our body temperatures are just too high. The proteins that make up aspects of this fungus will break down within our bodies. We're just too hot, essentially. So
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the fungus is too hot to too hot to handle.
Yeah, yeah.
There's no real risk today or tomorrow of this fungi being able to survive warm systems. However, what is the planet doing, Sean?
Definitely not cooling down, but
Definitely not cooling down. It's warming up. So these mushrooms, these fungi, are essentially like they're going to have to adapt to warmer temperatures or go extinct. That's just that's just one survival of the fittest right there. And so the idea is, maybe if the planet maintains a hot enough temperature for long enough that this fungus can evolve a way to survive higher temperatures, then yeah, we might become infected with mycelium. And it might take over our body, and we might become zombies and sprout mushrooms from our eyeballs and run around and try to infest other people.
Hell yeah.
But because we're so different from ants and spiders and other arthropods, the reality, again, even if the fungus is like, yeah, we can survive 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit or 37 degrees Celsius if you're,
not American.
not in America. That even, like, just the fact that we aren't ants and that we're so different from ants and how our entire body is basically set up, that it still probably couldn't infect us.
Gotcha.
However, there are other things that can affect us that are just as scary, if not scarier, which maybe we can kind of mention at the end.
Oh.
I don't know if you're going to talk about it, and I don't want to spoil anything. So
Yeah, I don't know. I'm excited to hear these later then. Very, very cool. I think it would be a great pivot into one of my topics for today.
Yeah.
And so 2024, it was a year for the bugs with multiple broods of... Do you know what came out this year, Spencer? Were you
and
around?
I didn't get to see them in the numbers that.
Well, neither did I. So
Okay, that's fair.
I
if you would have still been in Indiana, you probably would have had a good chance.
yeah.
But to answer your question, Sean, you're talking about dolphins, right?
Dolphins, yeah. the bug called dolphins. Yes. No, the periodical cicadas went crazy this year in the U.S. And so periodical cicadas, if you aren't familiar, are in one of my favorite genuses, Magic cicada, which just looks like magic and cicada mushed together. It's a pretty magical species.
Magic the cicada.
But this genus actually includes several species, and they are separated by their 17 or 13-year cycles, with 3 species following the 17-year and 4 following the 13-year. And what do I mean by 17 or 13-year cycles? These insects spend over 90% of their life underground as nymphs, feeding on the xylem from tree roots, and emerge after 13 or their respective 17 years, molt into adults, mate, lay eggs, and the cycle begins again. This is different from annual cicadas that emerge every year. Periodical cicadas are smaller than the annuals and often more colorful, with their orange wings and reddish, creepy eyes. You may also know them as brood X cicadas, but that is just one brood, though a rather large one. There are 23 broods, and different broods can be the same species, just on a different schedule. They hype up. The hype for the cicadas this year was for a good reason. It was the first time since 2015 a 13-year brood cycle emerged in the same year as a 17-year brood. It was the first time since 1998 that adjacent 13 and 17-year broods emerged in the same year. And for the first time since 1803, that brood 19 and 13 co-emerged. And it was the first time that all 7 named periodical cicada species as adults were... You could see them all in the same year. And this will not happen again until 2037. And you will not see all 7 species emerge in the same state of Illinois again until 2041. So this year was crazy. There's many years you could see a periodical cicada, but this was like all sorts of stuff was happening. And if you were in Indiana or Illinois, even more so, you could see a lot of different species. But how does this all tie into the theme of the day? Well, I really want to discuss Massospora cicadina. I'm probably butchered that, but I'm never getting better at these scientific names.
Neither you or I ever will. Zach was the expert on that.
Yeah.
And so it's just, we're doomed from now on. If you want to know how to pronounce stuff, don't listen to this podcast. Nope. But if you want to know cool things about what we can't pronounce, then listen to this podcast.
This is the podcast for you. But, so this Massospora cicadina is a fungal pathogen that only exists on these periodical cicadas. There are other species of Massospora, but this one specifically only targets these 13 and 17-year cicadas. This fungus was first described in 1845 by John Latrobe, who merely mentioned that some cicadas experienced some rotting off of their hindermost parts. In 1851, though, Joseph Leidy described and illustrated that this abdominal rot was caused by a fungus. This rot is half of what this infection is known for, so let's break down that part first. An infected cicada has most of the infection within the inside of its abdomen. Eventually, the rear tergites or segments of its abdomen will fall off, and what is left? This fungus that appears as this white, often described chalky mass or plug is the part of the fungus that produces spores to further spread this fungal pathogen. And I'm really glad I got to follow Spencer today because he already described all of this and what it means to you, so I don't have to do that.
Yeah.
So this already sounds like something, from The Last of Us or some other zombie show where the fungus replaces some part of the organism's body. These cicadas have their ass fall off and replaced with a fungus. But wait, there's more. And, I said this is just, this part of their butt falling off and being replaced with a fungus was only half of what this fungus is known for. And if you had seen any of the big media headlines, the big flashy titles from this summer, you may already know what I'm going to talk about. This fungus is also known for increasing their libido. Some of the titles were like, sex drive has kicked into like overdrive, or their sexual desires are kicked into overdrive with this fungus. And the adult cicadas are already in a mating frenzy during this time. But now these infected individuals are taking it to the next level with this fungus, trying to spread itself to more cicadas. And, going back to Spencer's, it's not like the cicadas are being, influenced, taken control of by these funguses. They're essentially like sex-crazed zombies at this point. And infected individuals are sterile, but this does not stop them. Both males and females can become infected. Females will still mate with males, but males will respond to the mating call of both females and males. And to take it to the next level, infected males are known to alter their behavior and even act like healthy females so that healthy males will attempt to mate with them. So this fungus is really driving these like bisexual zombie cicadas to spread the spores far and wide amongst the cicada population. Infected,
It's amazing.
It's like they do not care about, typical procreation anymore. They're just seeing a body as a body, and that's all that the fungus cares about. And individuals are known as flying salt shakers because they often drag their abdomen around the ground, spreading spores, and then they'll fly to the next spot to spread it even more. And I'm sure as they fly, like some spores are probably also released. And the life cycle of this fungus I found pretty interesting. Nymphs of cicadas are infected with this fungus in the soil, either on their way back into the soil before spending 13 to 17 years, or on their way out, they'll pick up some of these spores and become infected that way. They'll emerge, molt, and become asymptomatic adults. And after a week or so, though, the symptoms start to show up, their booty falls off, and they start to become more, open sexually. Well as physically. They don't have a butt anymore. This is this is when transmission from cicada to cicada takes place, and spores called conidia infect new cicadas that did not pick up the fungus from the soil. These new adults, inside these new adults, a new type of spore is produced called a resting spore, and it is not contagious by other adult cicadas. But these are the spores that will lie dormant in the soil and wait for the next generation of nymphs to pick it up, just kind of biding its time. So it has this weird stage where it needs, to be passed from one cicada to the next in order to complete its life cycle. And I think that's really interesting. We see this a lot in parasites, where it needs different organisms to complete its host, or to complete its life cycle, but it's usually like two different hosts, like a mouse and a cat for whichever parasite that is. I can't think of it right now. But this one requires two cicadas. And I mean, can you just imagine if this was like analogous to something in the human world? Like,
oh my god!
Like, imagine you're chilling with a woman or a man, and honestly, you aren't even sure which at that point, because they've masked it so well, and then things are getting hot and heavy, and all of a sudden you realize like their peach is really just a shiitake mushroom, and it's they are not who you think they are. And now you're like, no, get your mushroom away from me.
That would suck. Here's my thoughts on a future really crappy sci-fi like channel movie that some scientist is studying this, going, hey, I was on antidepressants, I lost my libido, my sex drive was gone, and I want to make a medication that drives up sex drives for people who want a higher sex drive, or hey, let's make some sexy pills that can go into a kind of a gross looking gas station bathroom or something like that. And they're like, yeah. So they pull it out, and then they do it wrong, and then all of a sudden they create, they're looking at these cicadas, and then they create a human version of this. Yeah.
Their libido will be back, and they will not care on the gender of the person they're trying to hook up with.
Yeah. I mean, movie rights are mine, so if you want them, you gotta pay me.
No, we got something there. You got something there.
Yes, Sean, don't take this from me. Yeah, that sounds terrible. It just is so crazy to me how long insects can live and do things when essentially most of their body's gone.
Yeah. I can't imagine.
Which also...
No.
Yeah, which is also why I'm not too concerned if it makes a jump to us, because I feel like we'd be long dead by the time it could do anything that it wanted to.
Yeah,
unless if it goes straight for the brain, I don't know.
Yeah, I think in the human world, it's going to be pretty hard to, convince someone to mate with you when your lower half is not human anymore. Or you're like, let's touch body parts, and there's this I don't know, a shiitake mushroom, or it's not what you want it to be. I think that's going to be a very limiting population of people that are going to still want to participate in those activities.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's interesting, and it's crazy that to me that fungi can like just evolve to be able to do these types of things.
Yeah.
Like,
And I mean, there are other, like, you can find this fungi with annual cicadas, but that fungus won't affect the 13 and 17-year ones. So it's crazy
Right.
that they've evolved like this, very species specific.
yeah.
And then it just waits there in the soil dormant for
Like,
that long.
How did everything go so right for a fungus to be like, you know what? Yeah, the thing that I infect only comes out every 17 years. I'm perfectly content with that.
Yeah.
That's crazy to me. Like, to be able to get the time, because we don't understand how the cicadas do it, right?
Well,
we don't.
No, I'll say I don't 100%, but I did read an article where scientists were like messing around with them, and I think they were adjusting light cycles because they ended up causing a population of them, and it may have been in a lab. Let's just say in a lab, controlled settings. They ended up having them emerge a year earlier because they were like, I think they were messing around with the light cycles, basically speeding it up, and they somehow got them to emerge an entire year after 16 years versus 17. So
Yeah, but aren't they underground?
yeah, which doesn't make any sense then now that I think about it. But I'm gonna have to go back and reread that one.
I would love that one.
Yeah.
I mean, I believe it. I for sure believe it. Like that. They
Well,
did
now I
something
don't.
and-
Now I don't believe it. I don't know what I read anymore.
Right. Okay. Well, interesting. So,
Yeah. Somewhere they got them to come out a year earlier, but now I don't remember what they were messing around with.
right. Man, how weird would it have been if one escaped from the lab and just felt like the only one
the world's
on Earth?
loneliest cicada.
Right, cicada. Yeah. There's another movie for you. Oh my God, I'm full of them. So, very cool.
Yeah.
Now, Sean, I have a question to ask you.
Yep.
What do you want to do with your body after you die?
That's a good question. I've been just saying like, disperse my remains over a mountaintop.
Oh God, like your small intestine over there.
Well,
your like
did-
spleen. Who has to do that, Sean?
You
Somebody's
broke the
gonna have
joke.
to carry them in like little baggies or something.
You messed with the joke because normally people would be like, "Oh, okay, spread your ashes," and I was gonna be like, "No, just my remains." You're supposed to be like, "Oh, okay, that's cool."
I ruined it for you. Here, my innocence was so far past. Like, I just watched Terrifier 3, so blood and guts is the first thing on my mind.
You're like, "No, this makes sense. He wants his body."
I was like, hey, like, I think it'd be cool to be just put into a forest. Just my body.
Just put me through a mulcher. Just shoot me into the forest.
Yum. Well, there'd be a lot of things that would be very happy to clean you up.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Okay. Well, that's what I'm gonna do. I know that I now know that was a joke. So, but I'm gonna hold you to it.
Okay.
So if you happen to die first, which you work out, so, and I work out a lot less. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
Then I'm gonna do that to you.
Okay.
Your wife probably will not appreciate it, but just be like, "Hey, listen to that episode."
Yeah.
So, well, I don't know quite yet. Just literally, just throw me into the forest. Like, let the animals take me. If somebody finds my skull, then cool, they get like a skull.
Nice.
Like, put it in your room, you like goth person or something.
Hell yeah.
I think it'd actually be kind of cool to have my bones put into the Paris catacombs. That'd be pretty cool, but I don't think they allow people to do that.
I think you have to like die during a plague. For that to happen.
Well, I mean, we kind of lived through a plague.
Oh, true.
So, maybe the next one will be around soon enough. So,
Yeah.
Well, some people, not either of us, it sounds like, they want to be completely frozen, cryogenically frozen in a vat of something so that eventually they can be resurrected when the technology is right.
There's a cartoon about this, wasn't there?
Cartoon.
Oh my gosh. Oh, it's an old one, and it's animated. Because all cartoons are animated, Sean. Good job there. There's like a cyborg girl. There's a robot. There's like a talking crab. Our listeners right now are being like, "Wow."
A cyborg?
Cyclops. There's like a robot guy. Oh my gosh. The main guy's name is Clyde? Clydesdales? We're going to be editing some of this out, I guarantee it. But Futurama.
Oh, Futurama. Oh, my God. Yes. I don't know why. Well, I guess maybe the thought of that is they were alive when they were frozen.
Oh, okay.
I've seen, like, all of Futurama.
Well, he wasn't. That was an accident, though, right? Like, he didn't.
Yeah, he, like, fell into it,
Yeah.
and then he was frozen for 1,000 years. Yeah. Futurama, way better than a lot of other adult cartoons.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's better. It's obviously better than Family Guy. That's not a very low bar there.
Oh, I think that's a highly debated topic, but I'll let you roll with it.
Oh, interesting. I don't know. I liked Family Guy when I was younger. I like Futurama a lot more. But
Okay.
either way, back to the story. Yeah, so yeah, some people want that. They want to be frozen completely so that they can be either brought back from the dead or, in the case of Futurama, just, awakened, I guess, in 1,000 years. Or if you've seen any movie with Brendan Fraser, Encino Man or something like that, where he's a caveman that's frozen in a glacier that's thawed out
I have not
10,000
seen
years
that.
later. Oh, it's so good. It's so 90s.
Oh,
Like,
okay.
it just screams the 90s. So anyway, my first thought of this was somebody like Walt Disney, who's famously, supposedly, cryogenically frozen in a vat somewhere underneath Disneyland. I don't know. That's the controversy behind his death. I don't know if it's actually true, but whatever. Now, freezing is obviously the topic of what I'm going to discuss kind of briefly. Now, it's something that I also kind of studied a little bit during grad school, is that we as humans and our lovely pets, and we don't have to deal with the extreme cold temperatures of winter. Like we do, but we can just dress up, go outside for a little bit, and then go back inside of our heated houses. And we've been lucky about that for a really long time. Some animals, they can find a cave deep underground, or they can find a nest within a tree, or they can find something underneath the snow layer, which, if you're not aware, if you live in an area that has constant snow on the ground, if there's like enough snow, so we're not talking about in cities, right, where the snow is plowed and taken away, but out in maybe a forest where the snow is typically hanging around all winter, that layer beneath the snow and at the ground could be about 40 degrees Fahrenheit, which is obviously above freezing. And so what it creates is like a layer where life can exist through winter. So that's why some animals, some like mice species and other smaller rodents, don't actually hibernate. They create these underground vast tunnel systems where they can run around all winter and be protected from predators above the snow. But some things, if they're not warm-blooded and they can't hibernate and just maintain their own temperature and slowly, eat, have their bodies eat all the fat that they've been storing all summer and fall, they have to essentially combat with the fact that their body temperature is going to match with the temperature of the outside, which, if you've ever been in the northern or farthern, or far southern hemispheres, it gets really cold, well below freezing. And freezing is really bad for life. And the reason it's really bad for life is because ice, and you've seen this in snowflakes, you've seen it when ice forms on maybe your car windshield. Ice is obviously the solid version of water, but like all, rocks and stuff like that, which is a whole other debate whether ice is a rock or not, it crystallizes and it forms crystals. And in water's case, those crystals are literally sharp. Like, that's why a snowflake has lots of points on it. Well, when you freeze, so if you put your hand out of a window and have it stay out there for 4 hours in the middle of winter, you bring it back in and it's hard as rock. Well, those crystals are literally piercing, stabbing, and destroying your cells.
That's good.
Which is why it's so bad for us when we freeze. And that's why frostbite is so bad. It kills tissue because it literally destroys the cells that the ice crystals start to form in. And if you're an animal, you have to protect yourself from this while also being able to go to those temperatures. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about freeze tolerance here. So there's different ways that things can essentially be able to freeze completely over, because that's essentially what's happening without actually dying.
What?
And so this isn't necessarily maybe like coming back from the dead, but this is basically getting to the point where death is right on the brink. And if one thing goes wrong, then it is death for you. Mm-hmm. So controlled ice formation. Many freeze-tolerant animals survive winter by allowing ice to form within their body, which is scary, but only in certain spaces, specifically the areas where there's extracellular tissues. And another way of saying that is where the cells of your body are not. So not every aspect of your body is cells, right? There are spaces in between those cells, in between different tissues. And if you can allow ice to form in those areas and not within the cells, then you can essentially keep those cells alive through winter and survive that. Now, of course, you have to have some other areas that are like literally alive, like your heart, that are still pumping blood throughout your body so that your cells don't die for other reasons. But you can essentially like allow some parts of your body to completely freeze over. And come springtime, you just thaw out, and any cells or areas that maybe got some damage, you can just regrow. Maybe not an entire limb in some cases, but fix some tissues up. They can protect these areas that they don't want to freeze through these things called cryoprotectants, which essentially, Sean, I'm sure you have a car, and I'm sure you've put in some antifreeze into your engine at some point, right? Well, antifreeze is meant to do just that, is to not freeze when the temperature gets to 32 degrees Fahrenheit, 0 degrees Celsius. Because you don't want parts of your engine to freeze up. Because then it would be really bad for your engine.
Then I couldn't go to work.
And okay, maybe.
I should probably stop putting that in my car.
Yeah, yep. Everybody stop putting antifreeze in your car. We don't have to go to work anymore. We'll still get paid, of course. Well, that's how that works.
That only goes for people in cold areas. People in the South,
they're doomed.
Just stop putting gas in their car.
Right. They deal with hurricanes. They'll be all right. So anyway, what this antifreeze does is essentially lowers the freezing temperature of the liquid that they're in, these cryoprotectants. And in the case of life, organic materials, like the most major cryoprotectants are glycerol, glucose, sugars, and Taurulose, essentially a lot of sugars. If you pump up your body full of these sugars and some protein mixtures, it lowers the temperature at which the water that's in your body can freeze, because it will essentially stop ice from crystallizing. Now, the lower in temperature you go, there are points at which something will freeze. Like, you've overridden every mechanism and ice is going to form regardless. Supercooling is the definition is a state where a liquid remains below its normal freezing temperature without solidifying. You can stay in that supercooling point, and if you cool something down fast enough and it's either completely distilled water or there's something in there that stops it from crystallizing right away, because if the temperature falls low enough, things will freeze over. And I mean, if you really want to get technical with it, you can go all the way to absolute zero where everything is frozen. Like the universe itself is frozen. So supercooling is what I specifically studied because I studied an insect called larch case bearer. It's a little moth with a caterpillar phase that overwinters, but just meaning that like its caterpillar is the one that like survives winter. And they, unlike a lot of other insects, don't necessarily crawl into the ground or underneath the leaf litter and kind of use that nice 40-degree temperature buffer from the outside. They're just like on the twigs themselves. Like they're inside their little cases. There's no insulation there, essentially. Yeah, they're exposed to the cold temperatures. And these things live in the north. And they can essentially survive down to temperatures of around negative 40-ish degrees Fahrenheit, Celsius. That's where the overlap is. And yeah, which meaning they can survive most of winter. What I was studying specifically is how far can they go? And I was looking at two different populations of large case bear from Minnesota and then from Idaho, and then looking at the mechanisms potentially about why the differences exist between these populations, and it may be because of the tree that they infest, western versus eastern larch and stuff like that. I won't go too deep into it, but what's really cool is how I actually did this. So we took an individual case bear caterpillar in its little case, and we stuck it down into a little vial, and I put in these thermometer wires, and I'd shove them down in there, and so that they'd be touching the case itself. I'd put them into this negative 80 degrees Celsius freezer and cool them down. So I'd watch the temperature of their bodies fall to see at what point did they actually instantaneously freeze. Because eventually, like I said, they will freeze. They can survive down to certain temperatures, but beyond that, they're doomed. And I was trying to figure out what that level was. And it's kind of cool because you can measure this, like, how do you know when something freezes over completely, right? Like, when death hits it. And that's because when ice freezes, and I think this is the coolest part, it's kind of an exothermic reaction in that it releases heat. And if you have these thermocouplers can measure the tiniest little heat increase, and then you can see it start to fall back down. So the temperature, if you look at it on a graph, it's just a line that steadily goes down in a straight line. And then all of a sudden there's a tiny little spike, and then it keeps going down. And that spike is essentially the supercoolant point, the point at which you've overridden the supercooling, the point at which freezing doesn't happen within the liquids of their body to the point where it does freeze. And that's when death happens. Like, they're surviving temperatures of negative 40 degrees, which is incredible. Like, we cannot be exposed to that for more than a few minutes. And they can just, like, as long as it's negative 35, they're okay for a little while. Like, cool, great.
Huh.
Yeah. There are others examples of non-insects that can do this. I mean, we're talking about things that are cold-blooded naturally, right? Mm-hmm. Amphibians, reptiles. Wood frogs, I think, are the most famous example of freeze tolerance in like vertebrates. And they can survive almost being completely frozen over for weeks at a time. And the idea is that around 60 to 70% of their body water can turn into ice. And they use sugars in order to keep the areas of their body that are vital to life alive. I'll kind of wrap it up there, but there are a lot of things that can freeze over.
You know what can't freeze over? Baby woolly mammoths. Well, I mean, they can freeze over. They just can't come back.
They just can't come back.
They're fighting lots of that. Baby woolly rhinos, wolves. They're fighting lots of things. Definitely frozen over. Just not able to come back. Well,
Nope.
not like these guys.
No, not at all. Yeah. Oh boy. Poor little babies. I thought you were gonna say hell.
Oh,
I was
that
like,
too.
wow. Yeah, Sean's really optimistic about the future. Cool. So yeah, it's there. You go.
Cool.
Freezing.
For the last topic of today, I think this is a new record for us. Even though we're entomologists, I'm about to talk about a fourth insect today, or a fourth topic focusing on an insect. And while it's not necessarily dead or undead in itself, it does carry around dead bodies, and it has this camouflage, just undead camouflage. And it reminds me of scenes from The Walking Dead where the characters wear the skin of the zombies to prevent, the other walkers from detecting them. Well, the same goes for the nymphs of Acanthespis petax. And for the rest of this, I will say A. petax, because I don't know if I said that first genus correctly. But this is a species of assassin bug located in parts of Africa. Assassin bugs are in the order Hemiptera, which means they are true bugs. The main characteristic that insects in this order have is their distinctive mouth parts that have been modified to form a piercing stylet, rostrum, that allows for a piercing, sucking, feeding method. Don't get that confused with that of a mosquito. Mosquitoes are flies. They do have a piercing, sucking mouth part, but it's different. They're in the order Diptera. I really don't want to go down that path of insect classification right now, because that'll take up another hour or plus of this episode. So for now, just know assassin bugs have piercing, sucking mouth parts. And
beautiful.
While some insects in this order use their mouth parts to suck out plant nutrients, assassin bugs, like their name suggests, prey on other insects. They inject a pre-digestive enzyme into their prey before taking the food into their bodies. Immature assassin bugs, aka their nymphs, are more or less smaller versions of the adults. They may not have the full markings or body plan of the adults, but they function similarly but cannot fly. Some assassin nymphs need protection from predators or camo to not be detected by prey. A common theme amongst assassins is to put dust on themselves. I guess this is kind of like an insect ghillie suit. A petax is known to do this as well, but they often go, one level up to one better level of camouflage. These nymphs prey on a variety of insects, but ants seem to be a common food source. After these nymphs inject their enzymes into insects such as ants and drink out their insect smoothie, they fix the empty exoskeleton onto their back. They can achieve this using sticky adhesive threads that are secreted from their abdomen. These exoskeletons will quite literally pile up, and as if they really like showing off their kill count, to the point that they literally will have a pile of dead bodies on their abdomen. This is also known as masking, when one organism uses materials from its environment and applies them to their body. I guess technically we are masking every day, unless you're a nudist, of course. Can you think of any other organisms off the top of your head that mask?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that caddisfly larvae mask. They make these little huts out of sticks or rocks, glue them together and live inside them, and they are pretty camouflaged, I'm sure, to most things. So.
I was going to suggest bagworms, so you and I were like right there
nice.
in what we were thinking about. But hermit crabs, I think, are also probably an example of that for non-entomologist, a more common animal out there. But why do apetax nymphs do this? Not a lot of research has been done to prove one theory or the next, but
Do you think they haven't done research because they're like the reasoning right now that we have in our mind is that it's just kind of badass.
Yeah, that's all
We
they
don't
need.
want to.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like we don't want to solve anything beyond.
Yeah.
That.
They're like, that's metal and that's it. That's cool.
Good.
But some of these hypotheses or theories out there is that it could increase its chances of catching prey. While ants are not the only insects these nymphs catch and attach to themselves, they are amongst the more popular, and ants may not be able to physically or perhaps even, through sociochemicals identify these assassin bugs as a predator. The ants may even wait. So the ants may even see this pile of dead ants on these assassin nymphs and just get confused with like possible pheromones and completely miss that this is actually a predator in front of them. And so offense is one possible strategy. Defense is another, with the main predator of these assassin bug nymphs are jumping spiders. And while these are really intelligent spiders, they do not like to attack ants, especially clusters of ants, which is what these nymphs will look like with a cluster of dead ones on them, because they're afraid of being swarmed. And so this seems like, a likely possibility as well. And the most evidence they have is that masked nymphs are eaten or preyed upon less frequently than unmasked nymphs. So at least it's helping them survive one way or another. And it was a short one, but I wanted to throw that in there. Thought it was pretty cool.
It's so cool. Yeah, I mean, it just like people do this in a way.
Oh
like,
yeah.
There's the old like trope where you cut off the ears of your enemy and wear them as a necklace or or whatever. Like, yeah, to us, like we can look at that thing and go, yeah.
Well,
it's pretty cool. Like,
we also just like murder a lot of animals and wear their skins.
Oof. Yeah.
I mean, like quite literally, if it's not cotton, it's probably leather, fur. There's a variety of clothes made.
Oh my god! Yeah, I didn't even think about like a Victorian lady wearing like a fox scarf,
or even just
a fox hat.
Wool.
Yeah, wool. Well, yeah,
like
a little less scary because they don't
have to kill
the sheep, but still, yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Oh, I do love wool. Oh my god, I'm sure you don't wear wool as a vegan, right?
I'm just a dietary vegan, so
okay.
But I don't know if I have any wool, to be completely honest.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I love my wool. It works so well.
Yeah, it's very warm, I'm sure.
So yeah, no, it's so cool.
It's like clothes for bugs.
Yeah, and it happens to be the bodies of its victims.
Yep. I think it'd be so cool to find the shed exoskeleton of one of these things, because with the pile of dead ants on it, and just be like, what is that? And then you realize, because the exoskeleton's going to look like the most dead thing, being just the shed exoskeleton, while some of these ants and stuff may look almost more preserved.
Right.
I think that'd be really cool to come across, but you got to go to Africa for that.
I'll do a quick shout out for one other quick honorable mention.
Oh yeah,
that I alluded to earlier. I didn't want to leave people hanging there, and that we might not be able to be infested with cordyceps, but there's a good chance we could be infested by a prion disease.
Oh, but that's not a fungal. That's not fungus.
No, it is. It's not even a virus or a bacteria.
It's a protein.
It's a protein. Yeah. So if you live in the Midwest, you're likely very familiar with chronic wasting disease that infect deer population out here. So much so that if you are a deer hunter, you have to in certain areas get your meat tested,
or should be.
or should be, yep. Or even that you're not allowed to hunt in certain areas. If you remember mad cow disease that went through like in the mid 2000s that everybody was super afraid of, where all these cows were dying, and then like if you had to be careful about the meat that you bought from the grocery store because what if it came from a mad cow?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, just real fast. It's a protein, so the building block of most of our body. This one is a misshapen protein that essentially, when it interacts with another protein, it creates it tells that protein to also become misshapen, and then that protein now tells another protein to become misshapen, and it's a cascading domino effect, just like a lot of other things that can spread quickly throughout the body. But a lot of these are concentrated in areas of our nervous system. Deer, they will walk around, and if they're infested, they're essentially like they might be able to feed for a little while, and they're they might eat like some leaves from a little branch or whatever, and they get some spit on there. Well, inside that spit are some prions that are going to affect something else. But eventually, like, they become so disassociated from like their deerness that if you've ever seen a deer infected, they essentially not be afraid of predators anymore. So you can approach them, which never do. They won't run from you. They likely are acting weird, and by that they might be walking in circles. They might be like moving their bodies in certain ways that don't seem natural. And this is all the prion disease basically taking over their brain and not necessarily making them do this, but changing their behavior in a way they are no longer able to do anything but walk around and do things erratically. Humans can have a prion disease. I think it was Papua New Guinea, like they used to do cannibalistic ritual practices by eating the brain of their deceased. Yeah, if that's not for you, then that's not for you. Don't judge other cultures based on your own cultural bias. It was a part of their culture. Whether or not it's right or wrong is not for us to decide. It's not like Ted Bundy eating somebody. Like this, this is just what happened. Like when you died, you knew this was going to happen to you because you did it to your ancestors. Eventually, somebody got a prion disease. A protein just misfolded, whether through genetics or something, and they had this disease. It killed them. They probably weren't acting right, but they weren't like zombies. And then their family ate their brain and then ate the prion. And then that got into their nervous system, and then they died. And then the cycle continued, and people were just dying very quickly. But they didn't know that it was a prion disease, right? So the practice is no longer done in many places around the world, and that's the idea for a lot of zombie movies as well, is that it makes us aggravated and like we want to spread the prion to other people and blah, blah, blah. So a little quick shout out right at the end there.
I think a big thing is people say like, the deer is, the chronic wasting disease is in the deer, but it's not a matter of if that one can cross the species boundary. It's like when.
Right. Yeah, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when.
Yeah.
So, unfortunately. So be careful out there if you're a deer hunter. Follow the rules and regulations. Like, they're there to literally protect you and your family.
Mm-hmm.
Scary stuff. Spooky season. It's appropriate.
Spooky.
Cool. Good topics, Sean.
You too.
I think we'll end it there with our signature how.
How?